Welcome to another Fantasy Goodfellas video where we talk about the top wide receiver versus defensive matchups for week 9. You ready?
Those Fantasy Goodfellas.
Boom, boom, boom. Rolling on the field.
Those Fantasy Goodfellas.
All right, before we get started, let me explain what we're going to do. We're looking at the top wide receiver versus defensive matchups. Let's just go into it. Ja'Marr Chase, 30.56. How is he going to get there? Well, he's going against Chicago, who's allowed 32 points for the wide receivers the last 3 weeks. And Ja'Marr Chase has been averaging 29.6 the last 2 weeks. That's because he had that monster week 7. So that's going to show that he's got a nice little average there. So that's going to push it up slightly. So let's go to number 2. We have Michael Pittman, 29.28. Michael Pittman, what has he done on the season? Well, he's got into that 4th spot in week 8. So we like his trending. We like that offense. And when you have somebody with like Jonathan Taylor, it really pushes that top, front 5, front 7 up front. So there might be opportunities there. Number 3, Rashee Rice, 26.59. He's going against Buffalo, who's given up 29.95. That 40% of the defensive matchup. So that's going to push his stats up slightly. That's why you see him at 26.59. Number 4, Amon-Ra St. 26.06. They're coming off that bye. So let's look at this here, though. In week 7, he got about 80-something yards and 1 touchdown. So you expect a little bit more from Amon-Ra St. Brown. And let's take a look at that. So if you take that week 7 plus that week 6, no touchdowns in week 6, that's why he's got that average there. So that's how we are looking at that. So let's go on to number 5. You got Chris Olave, 25.64. Chris Olave had that monster week 7 game. And so with that monster week 7, he had 2 touchdowns. He had about almost 100 yards in those games. So that's why he's been averaging a lot. But let's go ahead and move on to our 6. Jordan Addison, 25.48, which is surprising because Justin Jefferson is the better wide receiver. So to kind of see how that's played out, Jordan Addison, he's good, but you can't sleep on Justin Jefferson. So I don't think that this matchup score. I mean, this is where you have to make your own decisions. Of course, he's going against Detroit, who's given up 38.65. So that kind of gives you an idea how we got there. So number 7, you got Keenan Allen, 25.16. There was a lot of receivers in week 8. Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnson didn't do anything. So I think that's where there's almost too many targets, but you need Justin Herbert to perform well. Number 8, Ladd McConkey, 24.92. What did he do? Well, he did 18.25 the last 2 games. He's going against Tennessee. The last 3 games they're giving up 34.93. So that's why his stats has been inflated slightly. Number 9, DK Metcalf, 23.82. He dropped one. It's going to be interesting to see how Aaron Rodgers and Metcalf mesh moving forward. But with Aaron Rodgers being so vocal and calling out Metcalf that went viral, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. At number 10, Alec Pierce. Number 11, Justin Jefferson, 23.65. How did we get here with Justin Jefferson? So let's look at his week by week. He was 26 in week 7, 32 in week 8. So I think there's got to be one extra little factor in there, star potential. Number 12, Roman Wilson, 22.8. Now, Roman Wilson, I believe he got into the end zone, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he did. So that's where he got some stats. He got about 74 yards, and his points has gone up. But again, is this an outlier, or can you count on Roman Wilson? It depends. So we have to kind of look. At number 13, you got T. Higgins, 22.7. T. Higgins, he's been averaging 16.5 the last 2 games. So he's going against Chicago. He's been averaging 32 points the last 3 games to receivers. At number 14, Xavier Legette, 22.6. The last 2 games, he's been averaging 13.95. Green Bay has been giving up 35.6 to the receiver position, and this shows you how he got there. Receptions, yards, TDs. That kind of tells you if they got into the end zone. At number 15, Wan'Dale Robinson, 22.39. So he did not get into the end zone the last 2 games. So he needs to score. And that backfield might have to change a little bit now that Scadaboo's gone. And how does that look? He's, let's say, he's all over the place. I know everybody's high on him, but he's only been in the end zone twice this season. He's going to need to start scoring. At number 16, Travis Hunter. Now, yes, he's got into the end zone, but the problem here is he consistent enough? So let's look. He's been slowly rising, getting involved with the offense. He had a touchdown, so that gives you an idea. And let's go back here. But he's going against the Las Vegas Raiders. So if you see that, the last 2 games, 37.8. And that gives you an idea. 2 touchdowns, split the points. It gives you a little window how we come up with these matchup ratings. All right, number 17, Jackson Smith-Njigba, 22.2. I think they were on bye. So now you have... He's going against the Washington Commanders, giving up 35.83. There's a lot of potential. He's been a top receiver all season. At 18, Troy Franklin, 21.72. I think this is the wide receiver that can kind of really start pushing it as long as he continues to do what he does. But Bo Nix is the dynamic quarterback. They're obviously rallying around him, and that's going to continue. At number 19, Khalif Raymond, 21.29. At number 20, Chamir Dyke, 21.26. At number 21, McMillan, 21.2. Let's see how he's gotten there. He's going against the Green Bay Packers, giving up 35.6. So realistically, they're pushing and inflating his stats big time because of the matchup. At 22, CeeDee Lamb, 20.86. CeeDee Lamb, he had that monster game 1, first game of the season, I think. Let's go back to it. Monster. Week 7 is the one. So he's going against the Arizona Cardinals, giving up 24.7. He's due for a breakout game. Here, Rashid Shaheed, 20.1. Number 24, Devontae Adams, 19.94. It's interesting to see Adams getting some. Let's see how he did. His yardage is kind of declining, but he had that 3 touchdown game in week 7. I just think that he's going to need to continue that and I think that's just difficult. 25. Jalen Waddle, 19.44. This was your second ranked wide receiver in week 8. And he's going against Baltimore. He's given up 31.05. You know, he wasn't expected to do well against Atlanta, who had the number 1 passing defense, but that didn't matter. So can you depend on Waddle now that Tyreek Hill's gone? I think you can. At 26, Kayshon Boutte, 19.08. At number 27, Trey Tucker, 19.01. Let me pay attention to him. I want to see what he's been doing. The last 2 games, he's averaging 4.15. That's not good. Let's look at his week rankings. I think they're on bye. So he did 29th place in week 6, 56 in week 7. They're on that bye, so I don't expect much from Trey Tucker. It might be a sell. At 28, Malik Washington, 18.9. He might be going against a bad Baltimore defense. That's where you get that inflation of some stats there. So it goes well for Malik Washington, knowing that Baltimore's not good. At 29, Parker Washington, 18.18. And at number 30, Terry McLaurin, 18.04. The problem with McLaurin is as long as Jaden Daniels is out, then you're going to be a little low on him just because you don't have that dynamic quarterback in Jaden Daniels. And that does it for the top wide receiver versus defensive matchups for week 9. Use this to kind of gauge how your players are going to do versus the defense. All right, good luck. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, we hope your week 9 fantasy football team does well.